How did we get to the current crisis, and how does the Jewish nation move forward? Machon Shilo, led by Rabbi David Bar-Hayim, is grateful to again have with us Jewish hero Yehonathan Pollard to help us navigate these vital questions. Welcome, Yehonathan.
Hello.
Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom and welcome to one and all, and specifically to our friend now of quite some long standing, and my interlocutor, Jonathan Pollard. Shalom.
Shalom.
So in our preamble, I asked you how are you doing. You said, "Well, I'm going crazy," and I responded that, "Well, okay, what's new? We're all going crazy because the world is crazy. The entire world is crazy, and more people are recognizing this fact." But before we go into such cerebral discussions, let us begin with some of the down-to-earth realities that we are hearing about in recent days and hours. There is talk of an American arms embargo, or certain stipulations being made, demands being made of Israel vis-a-vis the use of said arms, which amount to an embargo. What can you tell us about this, and which weapon systems would be affected?
I think we have to understand what the ultimate objective of this threatened embargo is intended to do or to serve. It isn't so much to preserve the Gazans, although that will have the Democratic Party thinks that will help them shore up both their radical, their Muslim, and their undecided voters in the United States. But as far as the president and his close circle are concerned, people like Blinken, Secretary of State Blinken, people like the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and others of their ilk, their objective is clear, and that is to preserve Hamas so that this Nazi terrorist organization can join with the Palestinian Authority in a national unity government, if you will, and proceed to form a Palestinian state in both Gaza and the territories, otherwise known as the West Bank. So I think right now we have an end of the alliance, at least with the Biden administration, the Israel-U.S. alliance. And my own feeling on this is that there should be no compromise whatsoever with the Americans on this critical strategic issue. If we have to fight without Washington's support, so be it. And I can get into what that may mean in just a second. As for the, quote, endangered Gazans, we should be clear about one thing. It is Egypt and the other Arab countries that are endangering them by not allowing them in.
Which, by the way, must be pointed out, is in contravention of international law regarding refugees. The law, as it is
especially stated, endangered refugees,
as it is constantly mentioned, and we are reminded, these laws state, whether one accepts them or believes in the moral and ideological underpinnings thereof is another question. But these laws state that if there are people who claim that their lives are in danger, and they knock on your door, your border, saying, "Let us in,"
you are obliged.
Our lives are in danger. Our welfare is in jeopardy. Our lives are in jeopardy. You are obliged to allow them in.
Yes. Now, look, we could alternatively, we could concentrate. This could be done very easily by warning them in private that if they go ahead and impose any conditions on us which amount to an embargo, we'll be forced to consider reliance upon nuclear weapons. Now, if that's what they want, then, okay, so be it. But it's on them.
It has been
not,
it has been suggested by some, including General Brick, whom you have mentioned on occasions, that if we were to use nuclear weapons, we would be signing our own death warrant because others would do the same against us.
Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. On this matter, General Brick couldn't be more wrong. I don't believe that our nuclear arsenal should be reserved for a retaliatory strike after we've been essentially destroyed. I've never seen the virtue in mutual assured destruction. Mad. It's ridiculous. These weapons, or maybe it's because I was basically trained to be a Soviet general staff officer, but these weapons were originally designed for deterrence. And unfortunately, as I've mentioned from time to time, the enemy is not afraid of us anymore. And if the Americans push us to the wall and we are dealing with existential issues, such as our need to destroy Hamas, that is an existential issue, or even our need to eliminate the Iranian nuclear threat, which is existential, then we should be at liberty to use whatever weapon we deem to be appropriate to meet the threat. Now, look, October 7th served as a wake-up call for many people in our country as to the true nature of our enemies. It woke many of us up. Not you, not me, of course, but I mean, as far as the left was concerned, it woke them up.
Some of them, yes, but I must stress, not all of them.
Not all of them.
The hardcore progressive left, both in Israel and around the world, have not changed their tune at all.
So be it. So be it. Lemmings.
If anything, they've only doubled down.
Fine. The point that I want to make by this is that just as the October 7th massacres awakened a lot of people who were amenable to being awakened in Israel as to the true nature of our enemies, I think this latest diktat, or threat, if you will, by the Americans to declare an arms embargo by any other name, it's an arms embargo on Israel, if we have the temerity to finish our war against Hamas on our terms. And what that means is this alliance, I think, which has become almost an avodah zarah and has done such incalculable damage to our sense of independence, has now got to be dispensed with. And this is why it's very important for us now to tell the Americans quietly, but if necessary, publicly, you can't push a nuclear power around. You can't. I mean, it's over. If you're going to impose an arms embargo on us and threaten our lives on this one particular issue, and it's not just this particular issue with Hamas, it also involves the Northern Front with Hezbollah. So if you're going to threaten us like this, then you're forcing us to grow up. You're forcing us to understand what independence and national self-respect means. And if we can't get it from our enemies, fine, we understand that. But we better get it from our presumed friends who are not acting as friends right now. And if this is the only way we can get their attention, then we have to exercise that option. So do we use it? Is this just a veiled threat, or is there any seriousness behind it? There must be a serious intent behind it. Certainly, as far as Iran is concerned, there's nothing short of a preventive, if not preemptive, nuclear strike on that country, the details of which we can address at some other time. The same applies for Hezbollah. Why in the world should we wait for a conventional rocket strike by Hezbollah that will have the effect that a nuclear strike would have on Israel. And now, with regard to Rafah, it is quite clear that the Americans are desperate to maintain Hamas's viability for their two-state solution.
And it seems that their lackeys and appointees, I'm referring to the Chief of Staff Halevi, I refer to Benny Gantz, I refer to Eisenkot, both of whom are on in the war cabinet. It seems that they also are dead set against any serious military operation in Rafah.
Look, this touches on the subject of Gantz's recent trip, unauthorized.
All right. So, okay. So here you're forcing me to ask the question that I jotted down for myself before that I wanted to ask you. We've heard more than one version of these events. So I'd like to hear your take. Did Gantz invite himself, as the Americans themselves recently claimed in their own words? This is recorded. Or did the Americans invite him or giving his marching orders and tell him, come to speak to us for your to receive your orders?
Let us back up just a little bit and understand what's going on here. When Secretary of State Blinken visited Israel the last time, he insisted on seeing our Chief of Staff, Halevi. Bibi said, no, you can't. And Halevi agreed and met with him alone without anybody else there. And let me just say, as an aside, do you understand what dangerous position that put Halevi in? Because now you can allege that anything happened there, that he conceded whatever, that he acted as less than a nationalist. And there's nobody to counter, to oppose that. So it showed with Halevi how weak he is and how dependent he is on American approbation. As far as Blinken is concerned, I had asked many of my friends who are in positions of national Europe what would happen in their respective countries if Secretary of State Blinken had flown in and demanded a private, unmonitored audience with their chiefs of staff. And the answer, which was uniform across the board, was it would never happen. First of all, the prime ministers of these respective countries would never approve it, ever. And second of all, no chiefs of staff would ever agree to it at all if they valued their professional career. So here we have something different happen. Okay, that's the setup. So now we have Gantz suddenly appearing in the United States. Well, what happened? It was kind of a meeting of the minds, and I'm speaking from inside information now. This is not a hypothetical, it's not my supposition. Both the Americans and Gantz's advisors met, and they both agreed that it was time for Gantz to come to the United States. Now, there are a lot of reasons, but one central reason for this. To say that it would be a slap in Bibi's face, of course, and to say that it would undermine his perception as an effective prime minister, of course, would also be a valid interpretation. But what the Americans are trying to do with the support of Gantz's closest advisors is to establish the American preference for someone like Benny Gantz to be the next Rosh HaMemshala, to be the next prime minister. And the Americans can read polls just as easily as we can. And it's beyond all doubt or question that the overwhelming majority of Israeli citizens want Hamas finished now. So with that in mind, Benny Gantz was allowed to restate his support for that strategic objective, while also exhibiting his support for the hostages, etc. what we don't appreciate is that this man, Benny Gantz, has never outright rejected the eventual creation of a Palestinian state, however you define it,
He cannot be nailed down on the topic.
at all.
When he was asked on a number of occasions recently by various Israeli journalists, senior Israeli journalists, what his position is on this matter, he steadfastly refused to answer.
Exhibit A. And this is what the Americans want. They want a pliant representative, if you will, in Israel as the prime minister.
Well, he's definitely, in that case, he's their man.
That's what I've said. He's their man. Correct. So he can go around screaming and yelling. Well, that's not his way. Being emphatic about our need to finish Hamas, because that's what the polling indicates the Israeli people want. And he can also fudge on the issue of an eventual Palestinian state, and leave it open, which appeals to the left here, center left, and it also, more importantly, appeals to the United States. Well, the Biden administration in particular.
Which means it's not open at all. That just means yes.
That means yes. If you don't answer one way or the other, then the default position is it's yes. It's like saying it's all over but for the screaming. Well, in this case, it's all over but for drawing the lines on the map. And any way you draw them will spell, God forbid, our demise. So this is what Benny Gantz is doing, first in the United States and then in Britain. Remember, this is an unauthorized trip. And if you read the American media, they're quelling, they're proud over the fact that Gantz is thumbing his nose at Bibi. So if you look at this whole situation right now with this trip, followed up by this American diktat, it shows that, as they've done in the past, in many countries, they are attempting to overthrow a democratically elected government. Now, what kind of weapon systems are we talking about? Well, the military high command, our betters in uniform, if you will, have seen fit to make us criminally dependent on an unreliable imperial ally. Now, the New York Times came out with a very interesting article, which basically showed that a lot of the munitions that we dropped, an extraordinary percentage of munitions that we have dropped in Gaza over the years, were duds. And that Hamas really didn't have to import a lot of very dangerous explosives, because they simply sawed open, aerial bombs or artillery shells that didn't go off, and took out the high grade explosives and repackaged them in their missiles. Okay. And this has been confirmed by our side as well. So it's not some strange story that was cooked up in the back room of the New York Times. I mean, this is a credible story. So the question you have to ask is, why were there so many duds? Why? And the answer was, well, we wanted to save money on constructing, or that the Americans had here, that was ancient, filled with ancient equipment, aerial bombs, as well as equivalents of aerial bombs and artillery shells. So what we did was we used weapons from this very old stockpile of American ordnance.
So you said, here in Israel, we know there were, and there are, I imagine still, stockpiles of American armaments that were deliberately placed here in Israel for a rainy day, for various reasons.
Correct.
Mainly for the use of the Americans, not necessarily for our use. Correct?
Correct. But we could use them correct. But we did have access to these stockpiles if necessary. So what our betters
So we use those stockpiles?
Yes, we have used them from time to time. And it seems that many of the aerial bombs and artillery shells that we used over the years against Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza were duds, because the equipment the Americans left here was old equipment. And the failure rate on this equipment is naturally very high. So
people should understand that certain types of weapon systems, even very primitive, basic weapon systems like artillery shells, they do have a use-by date on them.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The various chemical compounds, explosives
deteriorate.
They are not able to remain at nominal performance indefinitely
at all. So here is a prime example of how criminally inept our high command has been in terms of making us dependent on the United States in general and on defective equipment in particular. They sacrificed our independence kind of on the altar of being good clients of the Americans. I don't want to say that, it was just a way of saving money.
I don't think it had anything to do with money.
No.
I think it had everything to do with maintaining their stranglehold on power and control in Israel.
Correct.
The deep state wants nothing more than to be beholden to the United States, to the progressives specifically.
They are all involved with this. And by the way, now, one of the other reasons why they want Gantz to be shown to be the preferred successor to Bibi is because they want to insulate him or inoculate him, if you will, against any charges that can be made against him for the October 7th fiasco. They want him protected like like somebody who needs to be surrounded by a protective uncle against salacious charges or horrible charges of unprofessional conduct or behavior.
The Hebrew expression is to be mu'trag.
By an etrog.
To be turned into an etrog.
Right.
Which people, at least a certain type of etrog, has to be kept in a very protected and kept in a particular environment, so that the top part doesn't get broken off.
So here you have, who knows what position we would have been in if the majority of the weaponry that we dropped on Gaza over the years had actually worked. We would have been in a much better position. And I saw pictures in the New York Times of Hamas ordnance personnel recovering 2,000-pound duds, aerial bombs. And the amount of explosives that you can get out of that is just inordinate. It's massive. And so here again, we have a dereliction of duty, not just on the part of Gantz, but on the entire high command.
I must disagree with you. We're not talking about dereliction of duty. We are speaking about deliberate.
Are we talking about treason?
We're talking about deliberate treason, or if you wish to refer to them as a fifth column. They also have their own self-interest and self-preservation.
Absolutely.
They view the Americans and the West in general as a device and as a means of denying, shall we say, that their nemesis is Netanyahu, so they claim.
Correct.
So the worst thing possible would be for Netanyahu to continue in power. By the way, this is proved recently when in an interview a few weeks ago on the radio on on Galei Yisrael, the radio station Galei Yisrael, a leftist pro-hostage release person was being interviewed. And he said, we have to release the hostages at any price, no matter what. That's the first and the only real priority. And this government is not doing that, and that's terrible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The interviewer asked this person, okay, let's say that we accept your position, and we can get all of the hostages released tomorrow, with one condition, that Netanyahu remains in power for 5 years. What would you say? This is recorded. This is real. This was recorded live. You can hear it. In fact, that radio station, Galei Yisrael, is now using that as an advertisement for their own programming.
Right.
It comes over so well.
What did he say?
So this person honestly responded, said, "I really don't know how to answer that question."
Wow.
That's what he said. I don't know what to say.
Look,
There you have it. There you have it.
There you have it. I have come under incredible opprobrium and physical threat for my position that our love for our fellow Jews has been weaponized both by our enemies, like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the left in this country. For Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas, it's a winning game. It's the good card to play because we'll agree to anything, that, or so they hope. In the case of the left, their objective has always been to remove Netanyahu, to eliminate the threat of a conservative government, to the High Court especially, and to become, once again, pliant clients of the American empire. So when this guy says this, that I really can't answer, he did answer very clearly.
Exactly.
He doesn't love, he's not concerned with the hostages so much as he is using them as a means of removing Bibi and the conservative government he heads.
As with our enemies, our other enemies. In other words, we have domestic enemies within our midst, and we have foreign enemies. As with our foreign enemies, all you have to do is listen to what they actually say and take them at their word. That's all you need to do, to know the truth of the situation. If you want to know what the Ishmaelim want to do to the Jewish people, you just have to listen to what they say.
Correct.
You can read their newspapers, you can read their journals, you can read their interviews. It's all there.
They're quite open about it.
But the truth is, the hardcore progressive anti-Jewish, anti-Israel left within Israel is exactly the same. You just have to listen to what they say.
And sometimes watch what they do. And I'm specifically referring to the Chief of Staff's, this is Halevi's, decision to begin the promotion process within the High Command before the Commission of Inquiry has met. Why is this important? Because it addresses what you're just saying. They want to make sure that their successors, and by the way, they've all lawyered up now, which is, I think, really amazing. At our expense, by the way, we're paying the dime on their lawyers, the military lawyers. We're paying for this. Okay, so now they're going to promote successors to the people that are responsible for October 7th. And these people are trained by and have been protected by these, I call them villains in uniform, who are responsible for October 7th. And why is this important? Well, because these guys, they're all leftist, want to make sure that their ideology, their political ideology, is sustained in the wake of their possible removal. This should not be allowed. I mean, how is it that you can let a guy like Major General Aharon Haliwa, who should be in jail right now?
The head of military intelligence.
Yes, who should be in jail right now. How can you allow him in particular to appoint his successors? This is insane. This is why all of them, starting with the chief of staff on down, should have been removed immediately once this debacle occurred on October 7th. Immediately.
By the way,
But
I should point out that some months ago, at the beginning of the war, I said to some people that all these senior commanders, all the entire staff of the army, what's called the Matkal, the general staff, all the top commanders, heads of Shabak, police, etc., they all have to be removed and replaced. And a number of people said to me, "You're right, but we're at war now. You can't do it during the war."
No.
But
look,
now I've noticed over the last few months that more and more people, including, for example, General Brick and many others, have come around to the position that at least the chief of staff and the head of military intelligence and a number of other specific individuals that they named must be removed immediately.
Look, the high command, the general staff, collectively, has not expressed any responsibility at all. Not one of them has expressed responsibility for that disaster that occurred on October 7th. And as far as, Brick is concerned, I disagree with him on a number of things, but on this issue, he just said that as far as our fighting in northern Gaza is concerned, that it's unprofessional. The house-to-house tactics that are being used are unacceptable. There's no supervision whatsoever by the high command or the people like Finkelman, the commander of the Southern Front, none of them. And that we don't seem to have an appreciation. The high command does not have an appreciation for the fact that northern Gaza is being reoccupied by Hamasnikim.